Welcome to Business Minds. This week, we introduce you to Mia Homsy, Vice President, Workforce, Strategy and Sustainable Growth at Investissement Quebec.
The government should not sponsor and encourage job growth. You cannot have a strong economy if the workers are not qualified.
Accomplished economist, she was involved in building the budget for the government of Quebec, as well as the creation of the Quebec Institute, a Bureau of Economic Studies.
Their trademark was it's fact-based. It's a tough question. I ended up in politics. They bypassed the ministers and asked me to go deal it with the Prime Minister's office in Ottawa.
Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and enjoy the episode.
Ready on your side?
Ready.
We're good? Welcome to Business Minds. Today we are delighted to receive Mia Homsy, Vice President, Workforce, Strategy and Sustainable Growth for Investissement Quebec. Mia, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
So, first of all, we like to start our interviews by trying to understand what you do. So please, can you define your role in just a few words so our audience can understand a bit better what you do?
Yeah, it's not easy to understand with the title what I do. So I have 4 teams. One is economic intelligence, so understanding Quebec economy, the strengths, the industries, and all the macroeconomic trends. So to inform people at Investissement Quebec to take better decisions. There's the workforce team, that's new. So I was here to build that team and develop the service offer regarding workforce to help companies that have labor shortages. So most of the companies we work with. And then there's a strategy. So it's a corporate strategy. Where do we focus? Where do we put our energy? What sectors? What type of companies? Do we focus on productivity, efficiency? So to decide that. And then there's the sustainable growth. So a big challenge.
Excellent. We will dig into all of this a bit more later. Thank you very much for the introduction. So first of all, we like to start by understanding our guests' background, where they come from. So my first question is very simple here. Where did you grow up and what kind of job were you dreaming to do as a kid?
I grew up in Montreal. I'm born and raised in Montreal. My parents are Egyptian though. So they're both born in Egypt. My mother is from Lebanese origin and my father Syrian origin, but they met here in Montreal. So I went to school, everything here in French. And what was I dreaming to do? Well, something very modest, just be president of the United Nations.
Excellent. You're maybe getting closer each day. So at a young age, were you already attracted to the world of business and economy? Were there any signs that you would pursue a career in that field?
A young age, not that much, but growing up, yes, especially economy. And business, because when you like to understand the society and how it works, try to find what drives growth. You have to understand the laws of the market, and you see where growth comes from. So I was interested in really dig into the dynamic of the Quebec economy and how to promote growth. So directed my choices later on for my studies.
Excellent, good transition. What did you study? And when you studied, did you already have a clear goal in mind of where you wanted to go afterwards?
I had absolutely no idea where I wanted to go afterwards, except President of the United Nations. But it was a long shot, so I had to start somewhere. And I had no idea. I mean, I applied in pharmacy and economic international development at Université Montreal. I chose international development, which is kind of a bit of everything, economics, law, politics, and I realized my favorite topic was by far economics. So then I did a master's at the HSC in international management.
Excellent.
I learned Mandarin to be able to work with companies. I saw China becoming more and more important in the economic world every day. So I wanted to help companies from here do business with China. So I studied in China a few months.
Oh, wow.
And Chinese a few years. Yeah, but I forgot everything.
Oh, and so how did your career start? Can you tell us the story of your first job?
Yeah. And it's in line with the question you asked me, did I know what I wanted to do? No. So I finally decided to go in the consulting world, so aiming for the Big Four. And I was trying to get an interview, so I sent my curriculum to the Raymond Bachand, former Minister of Finance, because I studied with his daughter.
Okay.
And he saw my CV and he's like, well, you should come and work for me, while he was Minister of Economic Development. So I'm like, oh, why not? It's not exactly what I wanted to do, the path I had chosen, but it seems like an amazing experience. So I ended up in politics. First year economic development, then he switched to finance and asked me to follow him. So I did 4 years as a deputy chief of staff, and then worked for prime ministers and stayed in politics for at least 7-8 years.
Pretty cool. Did you have any hesitation before entering this world of politics?
Not that much, actually. I was disappointed that I would not apply what I learned in school and use my Mandarin. Yeah. But it was really interesting, and I was like, I can always switch afterwards. It's just, I'm giving it a try. I felt like when I don't know what to do, I just sleep on it, follow my heart, follow my intuition, and then just go and don't think did I do the right thing or not? Just do it.
Makes a lot of sense. And so after that, can you walk us through the main steps of your career that got you from that point to where you are today?
Yeah, and there's really a path with a straight line, on one thing, wanting to understand the main drivers of Quebec growth and Quebec economy, and what are the main challenges, and how can we find solutions to prepare Quebec to be in the best position to really capture the growth that we can have, because we have everything. I mean, we have a great talent pool, we have natural resources, so we can do it, but really understand better the challenges. So with the Minister of Finance, so working with extremely professional civil servants, I learned a lot. It's like a crash course that never stops. They know so much. You have to know so much and take so many decisions. Like when you plan a budget, the Quebec government budget, it's a lot of money. You have to decide where's going to be the growth, to what the money, where it's going to serve best. So it's quite a process. You learn quite a lot. It's complicated because there's a lot of politics between the office of the minister and the prime minister's office, between the colleagues, between the civil servants, between the population. So it's extremely complex and you learn a lot. And then I went to, I did the opposition and then started the Institut du Québec also with Raymond Bachand. So he asked me to go, and the difference between both is that one is in politics, but it's super related to public policy, but Institut du Québec, it's only public policy based on facts and learning from what's being done elsewhere and from their research. So it's in line with, and now today it's applying what I studied for 9 years at the Institut du Québec.
Excellent. And so I would like to dig a bit more into this foundation of Institut du Québec. How do you go from working in a politician's cabinet to funding such a cabinet that was, it didn't exist before. There was no reference before. How do you go from working for Raymond Bachand to creating such an institute, which studies the entire province?
Raymond Bachand is the link between both. So he got approached by the Conference Board of Canada at the time to be president of something that would be a branch of the Conference Board in Quebec.
Okay.
They wanted to do it in partnership with another organization, so they chose HEC. And he told me, I'm only gonna take that job if you're the director of this organization. And at that time, it has been 9 years almost that I was in 8-9 years in politics. I wanted to come back to Montreal. The Quebec-Montreal every week kind of gets a bit heavy at some point, especially when you want to have kids. So the timing was perfect. 2014 started trying to figure out how we would start something new in the research world without doing what other research centers were already doing, like des centres de productivité et prospérité d'HEC. There was a chaire de fiscalité de Luc Godbout. So it had to be different. It had to build on the strengths of both the Conference Board of Canada and HEC Montréal, but be different. So we used our background as their strengths and our background. So public finances, all the fiscal policy, workforce, understanding how the workforce works, the dynamics, and then we developed the curriculum based on that. And always, their trademark was it's fact-based. It's not based on opinion. It's not based on ideology, because most of the research centers, at the end of the day, there's an ideology in the conclusion.
That much.
So you see the facts and then you're like, okay, but the conclusion is not in line with the facts here. It's based on ideology. Not all of them, but on a public policy front.
More than you would think.
More than you think. And they're the more visible ones. So we wanted to go again, compete against them, like for the attention, the mediatic attention. So be in the newspaper, be on TV, social media, etc., but with facts.
Makes a lot of sense. And so what would you say over the 9 years that you spent there, what are the main accomplishments that you've made there?
Well, the first one is probably the last thing is that, having a succession that is like the Institut Quebec now is still like, they've been able to keep their position, their credibility, be influential in the media with people that have to take decisions. They still read their studies. So I'm very proud that even it was mainly driven by like who I am, because I started it alone. But even after I've left, well, they're able to continue the work they're super relevant and they're amazing. I read their studies and I'm extremely proud. So building that succession is probably what I'm the most proud of. And then I think it's developing a new way of understanding how you develop the economy in a world where you have workforce challenges, so an aging population and limited resources. So this concept of job growth, I think it's been 5 years the first time I said the government should not sponsor and encourage job growth. People are like, are you crazy? I'm like, no, we don't need it. Look at the demographics. Like population is aging at such a rapid pace. Why would we spend public dollars on encouraging job creation? We have to focus on productivity, on sustainable growth, try to influence how companies invest, try to find value elsewhere. That was like and now it's starting to shift. Mm-hmm. You see all the limits with electricity. We don't have enough electricity to find it, to accept all projects we could. Workforce is such a restraint for companies across all sectors. And it's going to happen with all the resources we have.
Excellent. And so moving on to your current organization, Investissement Quebec, Investment Quebec, how were you recruited and how did you feel about, because for this 9 years of Institut du Québec, as you said, it was kind of an entrepreneurship kind of activity because you created from scratch. And Investissement Quebec is already well-set organization. How were you recruited and how did you feel about this transition?
Well, after 9 years analyzing policy and going in the media, just saying what the government should do, I wanted to be like in the action. So the timing was perfect. And that some people at Investissement Québec saw me, read what like our reports, the op-eds I was writing, heard me at Gérald Fillon and others analyzing the economy and talking about the solutions. So at some point they're like, okay, stop talking about it and just come and do it, especially for the workforce part, but also economic intelligence, because what I did at Institut Québec is similar to just building a team of economists that know how to analyze, what to focus on, and make it useful after, because that's the whole point. And then workforce, well, I had many ideas to be put in place, and Investissement Quebec decided, okay, it's time for us. It's not in our mandate to do it, but it's time for us to help companies that have labor shortages, because it's definitely something that is going to limit growth and productivity if we don't try to do something different.
Okay, so Investissement Quebec is the one that approached you at that time. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And so, can you explain to us what economic intelligence is for our audience who maybe doesn't know exactly, and why it is important to conduct such studies as you've been doing for all these years?
Okay, so I could divide it in two main parts. The first one is like understanding all the macro trends and documenting them. So all the fiscal policy, monetary policy, productivity trends, labor market trends. So really the economic data, where we're heading, what do we expect for growth, in what sectors. So this is really useful for Investissement Quebec for the corporate strategy, but also for people on the ground that talk to companies every day. We can help companies better and be more informed if more people know what's coming, where we're heading, what are the main trends, short term, medium term, long term. And then the other part is really understanding the sectors, the various industries in Quebec, the emerging ones, the ones where we're already good, where the competition's coming from, how we should evolve, so we can be more focused, more targeted.
Excellent. And so you touched a little bit about this earlier. You've been in charge of preparing the budget for the government of Quebec. How do you approach such a responsibility, and how do you deal with the importance of the task? Because you can't really get it wrong.
Honestly, it's such a great experience. And you're not alone, right? So there's a huge team of dedicated and talented officials that really, they know the process and they guide you through it. But there's also the political part. So when you get elected, you have a few things you told the population you would do. Sometimes they make sense, sometimes they don't. So you have to figure out how you maintain these promises and how you make them work for real in the economy, in real life, with the policy constraints, with the fiscal constraints. So you have so many decisions to take. You want to be creative. You want to add new measures. And when I was there, we were in a very difficult financial position. It was after the 2008-9 recession. So we were in deficit, and there's a law in Quebec saying that your books have to be balanced after 5 years from the first year of the deficit, which is very difficult to follow that law. It has been changed since then because governments couldn't do it, but we decided to do it. So it was extremely difficult decisions. Where do we cut? Where do we ask consumers to pay more? Hydroelectricity, and so on and so on. So it was an extremely interesting experience, because you have to think about it, then you make it work, and then you have to explain it and make sure everything that was in the budget is really put into place after. So it's a long process, and then you have to start thinking about the next budget.
And so now moving on to another section where I'll ask you more about some broader reflections about your career. First of all, you touched it a bit before as well. What are you most proud of in your entire career as of today?
Wow. In my entire career, probably when I've been sent to Ottawa, it was a Friday night. I was having a beer home, and then the phone rang, and it was like Stephen Harper's office. You have to be in Ottawa on Monday with all the officials required. The deal for the taxe de vente Quebec, so the harmonization of the taxes, the federal and the provincial taxes. We were asking for Quebec. We've been asking for the compensation for the tax, because we have our own tax. Instead of having a harmonized tax, it's two different taxes, the federal tax and Quebec tax. And we were asking for a compensation of $2.2 billion. And Stephen Harper decided, we're doing it. But the Minister of Finance of the time, Jim Flaherty, was against it. So they bypassed the ministers and asked me to go deal it with the Prime Minister's office in Ottawa. So they're like, find a way, find a plane, bring the person. We're closing that deal on Monday morning in Ottawa. I was like, oh, okay.
All alone.
And we did it.
Oh.
Yeah. Well, there was someone from Charest's office, myself, officials, no ministers, with Stephen Harper's office. And we were like trying to write the different amendments to the law, and it's fiscal policy, extremely complex. Taxation. I'm like, oh my God, how am I going to do this? We spent 12 hours and then we had to leave because the plane cannot fly after 12 hours. It's not safe. So we were running to the plane but we set the base for the agreement that took place a few months later. So Raymond Bachand was like, I'm so grateful that you were able to do it. And Harper's office told Jean Charest and Raymond Bachand, without her, there would not have been a deal.
Wow.
$2.2 billion. So I'm kind of proud of this one.
Wow.
Yeah, my biggest deal ever, probably my whole life.
Congratulations. That's pretty impressive.
Thanks.
And so now looking at the other side of the coin, what is the most difficult situation you ever had to handle? And do you now have any tips on how to get out of such situations?
There were many difficult situations. Making mistakes is probably the toughest one. I was responsible for like all the economic data during the electoral campaign. And at some point, one night, I decided, you know what? I'm not going to work tonight. I'm just going to have dinner with my husband. But I chose the worst day ever. It was the night of the electoral debate, the Chiefs debate. But I didn't double check all the numbers we gave the Prime Minister. There were like 2, 3. A colleague sent them to me and I just forwarded them. And then I was eating and I was like, no, there's something wrong with that number, the minimum wage. I still remember it. I was like, it's too big. So I called the Prime Minister's staff and I'm like, I'm sure it's the wrong number. Don't mention it during the debate. He's like, it's too late. He's already there. And he mentioned it. And we got fact-checked. So all the team was like, so what's the explanation? Why do they say it's a wrong number? And I was like, spent all night thinking, how am I going to justify that? At some point, I just had to say, guys, it's the wrong number. I made a mistake. And it was not my number, but I didn't double check it. So accepting mistakes and the consequences of your errors, probably it's difficult. I had a hard time. It happened like 2 times maybe, like stuff like that big. And it's, but it happens and you get stronger after you develop mechanisms to avoid that.
What kind of mechanisms, if I may ask? How do you bounce back from such situations?
Well, you make sure you have a process that's solid enough and people around you that are solid enough to do the job, even if you're not there 100% of the time. So the process and the people are very, very important. And that's what I learned and applied like at the end of VDQ. Now, at Investissement Quebec, I could never do my job without having like the best team of managers around me, having strong processes. My role, I think, is to find the vision and make sure we're all going in the same direction. But then it's the role of others to make it happen. So, but that's difficult. You have to learn that, to embody that, and to trust that process. Takes time, takes mistakes, takes not burnout, but I mean being overworked. Because when you want to do everything, it's not sustainable. That's my other takeaway. Like, it's not a sprint, like the professional development and the career. I did it as a sprint, the 10 first, all the time in politics, beginning at Institut Quebec, but the kids were the game changer. I have 3 boys. It changed my life, and other personal situation made me realize, okay, if you want to be there and if you want to be doing interesting stuff for a long time, have to find a better balance. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon. So
That's very interesting. Thank you very much for sharing. And so, what are the most important skills that you have acquired in your life/career?
I think building empathy, because I was not very empathetic at the beginning. If others didn't work like as much as I did or had the same passion or the same drive, I was tempted to judge them, and they're not doing enough, they're not good enough. So I don't think you can be the best version of yourself, especially as a manager, when you don't understand what people are going through, how they are, how they live, their priorities, etc. So I think empathy makes you more human, so you can mobilize people and respect who they are, but still be inspiring. So really take the role of a manager who inspires the team, gives a strong sense of direction, vision, and mission, but gives space to people to be who they are. And that psychological security makes them better colleagues, better persons, and their work is even better.
Very wise words. Thank you for sharing again. And so, after all of this, thank you so much. I would like to take a big step back to ask you, what is the most important thing you learned in school?
Probably that if you work hard, you can do anything you want in life. I worked hard and I got results, so it built the confidence, but I worked hard.
Crystal clear. Thank you for this. Now we'll move to the last big section of this interview, focusing more on your vision, a broader reflection about your industry and your work. First of all, do you think we get enough economic education in our society?
The answer is definitely no, especially financial literacy and just understanding the world we live in. We would need more. It's a very vast question, how, when, etc. But more would be better.
Okay. And what is your opinion of what the economy is going to look like in the next few years?
That's a topic I really like. That's what I do. I try to see where we're heading. So the structural changes. The short-term changes, we don't know, recession, soft landing, no landing, whatever. But what's really interesting is like, what are the main changes in society and how it influences the decision we have to make to be ready for the next decades, 2 decades challenges. And I think there are pretty big structural changes. First one, starting with demography, aging population here, but in most advanced economies. There's all the digital transition speeding up. If you're not in it, you're out of it completely, and you're not following, you're not making profit as a company. So you have to do it, but companies are not ready for it, and the skills are not there. And then there's all the environment. So all the laws, 3,000 laws and policies in place now to make sure we get to the carbon efficiency, carbon neutrality by 2050. This is going to change completely how energy is taken into account. And energy is probably going to be one of the main drivers of economy in the coming years, decades. So when you put all these trends together, you don't do economic development the same way now that you did 10 years ago. Labor shortages, energy efficiency, carbon neutrality. If you don't follow this, you're out. So the trendsetters that are aiming to be productive in that context will be the ones that will change the world.
Okay, perfect. So now moving on to another point of subject that you've been studying a lot in your past at maybe at Institut Québec as well as Investissement Quebec. It's the difference in salary equity between men and women. We know that we are not there yet at full equity. What can be done today in the mid-2020s to get to that equity finally?
It's a very complex question because progresses have been made, but there's still a lot to be done, and there's no easy answer. So it's a bit of everything. But the main one is changing the mentalities. Just to give the example, the more people are going to see women with powerful roles or representing companies and sectors like that are usually more men, represented by men, like all the manufacturing sector, mining sector, financial sector, the more we're going to see strong, powerful, inspiring women there in politics, parity in politics. So in public organizations, you can enforce laws to make sure it's 50-50, the representation. But in the private sector, you can tend toward it. I don't think you should impose it. I think you should just try to go in that direction as a society. But I think it's more how we act, how we are, how we judge, and that makes the difference. So we have to change the habits and just the frame of thought. Like younger women have to know they can do it. They can do whatever they want. They can go as far, as high as they want. We have many examples now. So I think we're in the right direction.
A lot of good reflections to think about. Thank you for this. Now, another subject that you mentioned in a preceding interview, that working on the workforce issues, one of the main point of focus that you can have an action on is education. And so how are you able to influence political actions on education on the Quebec scale now through your role at Investissement Quebec?
Well, I've been thinking a lot about the main drivers of growth. And from any angle I was looking at it, I was always going back to training and education. You cannot have a strong economy if the workers are not qualified. Same thing for the transitions. People think that we're going to do the transitions like digital transition and energy transitions just like that by buying machines or whatever. No, if people don't have the skills, we will never be able to make it. So it's many people to train, all the workforce. So that's a huge change of paradigm. And then education, the literacy of the population, we don't realize it, but at least 30% of the society is not able to read an article from La Presse, Le Devoir, or the newspaper. So that's a big problem if you want to have growth and sustainable growth and inclusive growth. Have to focus on training people that would drop school, for instance. They can still work. They can still learn, but in a different way, in a different context. So I find there's like a societal role and responsibility to train people. Same thing for companies. But you can't force them. They have to find a benefit for them. And with the aging of the population now, companies are like, oh, okay, we have to do more to make sure to retain our staff, to be attractive. So they're trying to focus more on internal training. So it might change, but we're very far.
That's a very good transition because another important point of focus of your work is immigration, because it's an important factor in Canada's economy. And it often faces integration challenges. How are you able to help them in whatever measure you can apply to help the integration processes so that the workers stay in Canada and Quebec?
That's a very big question. And I mean, at Investissement Quebec, we're not the Ministry of Immigration. So we're not in the policy side. We're just applying the programs. So what we're trying to do is to make sure companies, our clients, and more companies we're in contact with, know what's available, what help's available. Because there's a lot of help for the immigrants, but also for the employers to make sure, let's say they have access to French classes in the company or outside, that they have access to local resources to help them find a home, a driving license, stuff like that. So I think there's a lot of help, a lot of organizations that have the mandate to help the immigrants integrate here. And we try to see with the companies what they need to be able to create a safe space for the immigrants here and their families.
Okay. And so you mentioned for the Ministry of Education does read the information you provide with them. Do you provide such kind of information to
For sure.
the Immigration Minister as well?
Yeah. And not just for integration, but for selection too. Because we see what's coming. Moderna was a good example. Ford EcoPro, GM Pasco, Northvolt, aerospace companies, like we see the projects coming, we see where the volume will be. The other ministries can't really see it. And you add that to all the needs of Hydro-Québec and to all the PQI, Programme Québécois des Infrastructures, so all the requirements in construction to build schools, bridges, and hospitals. It's like huge. So you need to have all the right inputs and find a way to adjust your programs, immigration mainly, but also education and employment.
Very good. Now we're going to the last question of this segment. What is the best piece of advice you've ever received? And would you give yourself the same piece of advice to when you were 20-year-old?
The best piece of advice, I think it's just to, it's in the last couple of years that it's okay to focus on your personal life, like being with your kids and trying to find a balance. Because when you find a balance, you get perspective on what you do. If you're only focused on working and just don't think about the rest, I think you lose the balance, you lose the perspective, and you're not being able to achieve what you want to do. So a few persons in recent years told me, focus, like stay true to your values, take the time you need, spend it with your family, with your kids. That's important for you. That's what's gonna make you happy. And you'll be able to achieve everything you want at work, even if you take time to be with your kids. So that was new for me. That was not something that was allowed. So, and now I'm much happier and I still accomplish what I need to do. But I take more time to do stuff I find important for myself.
Wise words that a lot of people will be happy to hear. So thank you for this. Now we're getting to the last few questions of this interview, getting the horizon broadened. What do you have left to accomplish?
So much. It's difficult to have a real impact. Like you have the vision, you have the team, you have the strategy, the action plan, but to actually make real changes takes a lot of time. So what I would like to do is continue working on that approach I developed at Institut Québec and I'm trying to implement here is really to rethink what is economic development in a world of constrained, limited resources. So you have to do more with less. So you have to change all the incentives. You have to make sure all the negative externalities, pollution, etc., are priced and taken into account, and all the positive externalities are also rewarded. So how do you encourage a company to go out of their way to make sure that will have less CO2 emissions versus another one that doesn't really care because it's not does not bring profit on the short term, well, you price carbon, but you find incentives to make it happen. Same thing for labor, for workforce. How do you convince them, or how do you adapt the policy to make sure we get more training, and make it more interesting for workers to work and go be happy every day on the job? So it's a change of paradigm that is it's deep. You have to change the tools. You have to change the KPIs. Everything has to change. You have to change the grids that you use to analyze the quality of a project. But we're there, like it's a must. We have to do it. And we are starting to do it, but it has to be more solid, more widespread, and done on a much greater scale.
Thank you for this. That was very complete. And so now on a more personal level, how would you like to be remembered by your coworkers and collaborators on the day you retire?
Well, probably as someone that did her best to make a change, to make a better world, and someone human and humble, hopefully. Humility is kind of my top value.
Excellent. And so bonus question here, if you could have a private meeting with someone, anyone dead or alive, who would it be?
Not very original, but I think I would say like Barack Obama.
Okay. For specific
I'm
reasons?
very inspired by just what he did, the way he did it, what he represents, the values, the change he tried to bring. He's an inspiration.
Very good answer. And so this leads me to the last question of this interview. What can we wish you for the future?
I think to continue focusing on making the world a better place, no matter what happens. I think it's the ultimate goal. Everything I do should bring and lead to that outcome.
Excellent. Then that's all we're wishing you. Thank you so very much, Mia, for being with us today. This was Mia Homsy on Business Minds.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We were in Asia somewhere with the Minister of Finance trying to sell the Quebec bonds when the minister just lost a tooth. And we were all on the floor trying to find it in front of the potential investors.